Does that mean we're good?
Yes, we are live now.
Okay, great.
The first voice on this recording was Catherine's.
Whatever.
Um,
I'm good
this
with
isn't professional or anything, so it's fine. Welcome back. I've lost track of what part this is. I think this is either part 5 or 6 now of our three-way discussion. We've been discussing um, what it was like to be brought up in the same home, how religion was taught in the home. We've discussed uh, our experience at church, specifically PBC. And I think last time we had a recording, which was not the last time we spoke, but last time we had a recording, we talked about uh, a lot about kind of the inner workings at PBC and the ways in which that uh, uh, kind of our perspective on how uh, dad interacted with that as an elder and a leader, etc. So I think today what we're going to do, the kind of the agenda is for Catherine and I are going to share our thoughts on the kind of the accountability slash responsibility side of dad's leadership at PBC and what our perspective is on that, and then open the floor for Everett to ask any clarifying questions that he has. We felt like that was kind of the best way for us to move forward. So Catherine's going to go ahead and start with what she wants to say, and then I'll follow on after her.
Okay. So first, Everett, I spent some more time looking at your draft of consensus facts. Um, and generally I'm okay with it. I'm not going to go through each one right now. I don't think we need to. But I know that was a source of frustration, and I think
Could I point out, I don't think the audience knows what that document is.
sure. So Everett drafted a list of factual statements from regarding PBC, how we were raised, generally regarding various Protestant influences in our home. That's what I'm referring to. So in I did just want to say that most of this I'm fine with. There are things that I don't recall, but I would, to 98%. And am I sure that that's correct? Yes. And most of that's kind of about, the history of PVC or things like that, where that's in line with what I remember. I wouldn't want to like sign off on this. Yeah, like under oath or something, just because, there is that 2%. But generally, my understanding of these things are correct. I did just want to say that before we start off. And like we had talked about offline, there's a lot of nuances in terms of how some of these things played out in terms of not kind of discrete things that happen, but PBC's general what they were teaching and what they weren't teaching and things like that. But I did just want to say that I generally I'm okay with this. Again, with some of those caveats that I just don't remember some of these things. So it's hard to go up to 100%. Okay. So I think some of the things I didn't get the chance to say when we were online last. I think when you take a step back and you look at what is the responsibility and accountability of someone who had all the positions that dad had. I think that is a great deal of responsibility. Hold on.
Two of us are parents that are trying to record in the middle of the day with 3-year-olds that don't understand what privacy means or what trying to get work done means necessarily. So interruptions can and have happened. So we appreciate your patience.
Okay, I'm back. Apologies. So I think there is a great deal of responsibility that comes with those positions, of being an elder, teaching from the pulpit, teaching classes, being a parent, homeschooling your child, all of those things. And I was thinking in terms of thinking a little bit about how I view, and it's different, but it kind of helps me think through it a little bit of like how I view my own. How do I view my own actions before I became Catholic? Because I was never in a position. I never had a title that Dad had, but I did hold, like leadership positions and like campus ministry, and I know that people put a certain weight on what I was saying, and I taught Bible studies, and that does, that has responsibility that comes with it. And I don't, I was espousing things that I don't believe in anymore. And I don't look back and think, oh, I hold all this culpability because I didn't know better at the time. But at the same time, I regret it. I don't know if that's the right word. And I wish that I could have known what I know now and believe now, and I could have implemented that earlier. Because it is correct that people coming to me wanting to in any way listen to what I thought or get involved in the things that I was encouraging them to get involved in were going to get steered away from Catholicism. Not because the institution I was a part of was anti-Catholic. Now I'm more thinking of not so much PBC, but not because it was like anti-Catholicism was being taught. Not even that there wasn't some supportive Catholics within the group. It was just the doctrines we were teaching were not in line with the Catholic Church. Therefore, there was a certain leading away. I wish I had never done. And I take responsibility for that. So I was thinking about that, and I think that helps me think a little bit more. Anyway, that just helps me think through some of these issues a little bit. Again, it is very different, but so Everett, I think this is going to be where I'm going to need some questions from you, because I know there's going to be more that you want me to specifically say or articulate an opinion on, and that's fine. But I do think that there is as much as I will stand my ground on the fact that teaching in a Protestant church is extraordinarily nuanced in terms of what you're teaching people in terms of the Catholic Church, unless you're in a Protestant group that is actively teaching from the pulpit that like Catholics are going to hell, which PBC was not that, as far as I never experienced. I don't think I ever heard anything like that. Unless you're in a group like that, there's a lot of nuance, because there's a lot of encouragement of following your own conscience. Seeing, well, Catholics are our Christian brothers and sisters, they just do things differently, or they have some things tacked on we don't like, but that's how they do things. Or because there's so much of that, I think there is a lot of nuance. But I think it's fair to say that if you were in a position of leadership at PBC, you were in some ways steering people away from the Catholic Church. Yeah, I think I'll stop there. Happy to say more, answer more questions, but I think, yeah. And same applies for how we were raised, right? I was not raised in a way that was pushing me toward the Catholic. But
So, are you wanting me to jump
if
in
it helps, because I'm okay.
Well, yeah. Could you go into the family stuff? I think that would be good, because I think those We've been talking about PBC and the family in parallel, but there are some differences there.
Growing up in our home, I was actively being taught Protestant doctrines, which clashed with Catholic doctrines. So I was taught that, communion is just communion. Being taught that it is simply a symbol meant that that kind of closes the door to it not being that, right? Like it does close the door to transubstantiation. Because as a kid, you believe what you're being told to a certain extent. So yeah, again, the steered away from Catholicism, I think that's correct. Like we were being steered toward, and not in a. I don't remember ever hearing. I think the first actually anti-Catholic thing that I heard or read was from the Bob Jones textbook that we talked about before. I don't remember ever anything being. Our mother is anti-Catholic, and I don't know when I realized that. I also don't think there was ever a time where I thought that Dad agreed with her. But I have no clear thought on when that happened, because to me growing up, it was like, well, Protestantism, that's the truth. To have concepts that there were these other things, you know what I mean? Other belief systems. Right there, you have to be a certain age for that even to be a thing. So I would not say I grew up being told that, the Catholic Church is the enemy or even necessarily bad. Just I was being taught in a way that would steer me away from their doctrines because they clash. I was being taught things that contradicted with Catholic teaching. And that certainly did play out in some of the textbooks we had. Some of the stuff I don't remember at all. The pathway readers being Amish, I had no idea. Don't really remember those. I'll take your word for it. I don't really remember. That's interesting. I remember Rebecca being. I don't really remember it very well. I feel like I'm rambling at this point. I think did I answer your question? I don't, but at the same time, I don't. It's not fair to say that once I reached an age where I was starting to question things, I was being told don't question. Or you know what I mean? I don't remember ever anything like that. But I also was not sitting there thinking. I didn't really think through any Catholic doctrine until I was in college. End of college. Undergrad.
Can I actually jump in with a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So there's kind of two things that I picked up on, and I want to make sure that we identify or draw a line. One of them is, Katherine, you mentioned some of the campus ministry stuff that you did at college. I know you were really involved in InterVarsity at UCLA.
Yes.
So I don't think we really need to get into all the specifics of what you did, because that's not really the point of the question I'm going to ask. Needless to say that InterVarsity was and Campus Crusade were both probably what we would call a non-denominational campus ministry that is certainly would fit under the Protestant banner, not under the Catholic banner.
That is correct. I would like to say I spent years around university and briefly some time in law school when I was already Catholic. I will say that some of the people I interacted with in university cared very much so about Catholic students feeling like they could find and make a home in university. I think it wanted to be, at least the people that I interacted with, staff, wanted it to encompass Catholics too. We actually had in undergrad, we did have a Catholic group like a subgroup Bible study that was led by a Catholic student, and there were Catholics that went to that, and um, and I heard those concepts espoused when I was in law school, that it can be kind of a home for Catholics. I myself ultimately determined that that was not something that I could really be on board for, because I think there was enough clash. I think that the organization is Protestant enough where it just doesn't work. But I will say, just out of respect for the institution of university, that they did try.
Okay, and that's
yes,
fine.
that is correct. For our listeners who may not know what that is, it's a Protestant organization, essentially, that does, yes.
Okay,
Is
so
not Catholic.
yeah, thanks for clarifying that. That's actually not so the question I had was kind of the next step, which is,
yeah,
as a leader, I can you still hear me?
Yeah, I was just
okay. You stepped away for a second. Okay, so as a leader, you led Bible studies. I know you were very involved at various levels. And I think to some extent at PBC, there were probably some people that also looked up to your viewpoints on things, that you were in the music ministry and did some things with Mexico and
that's
stuff.
fair. That is true.
Do you believe that now that you've had a pretty substantial change in theological viewpoint, do you believe, or have you at any time believed, that you have a responsibility to reach out to those people that you may have influenced to let them know that you've changed your views?
That's a good question. I don't think I do. I don't think I do have that responsibility. Um, I don't think I do have that responsibility. I think there's part of it that's, I think, because humans are the way they are, people change their views all the time, whether it's theological or political or whatnot. And so there's kind of that expectation that you have, that you might look up to someone, you might, someone even might be a mentor or a teacher or a guide in some way, but I don't think it's ever safe to assume that that person is going to have the same views 5 to 10 years later. It might be shock. You might think, well, I assume this person is always going to think this. And that's a really safe assumption. It's true. But no, I don't think that I have a responsibility to do.
Okay. And then the second question I was going to ask, and I'm going to follow up on that later when I talk, but I think that's an important answer. The second question is, you mentioned, you kind of alluded to a difference between steering people away from Catholicism as opposed to outright teaching against Catholicism. And the way I interpreted that, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this, is that steering away is more along the lines of teaching things that may happen to conflict with Catholicism, but if you were, as the teacher, to find out that someone disagreed with those things and agreed with the Catholic perspective, that would not be problematic for you, as opposed to teaching something and then being upset or concerned that someone would reject that for the Catholic perspective.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
What I had in my mind when I was saying that was the Protestant groups that will, from the pulpit, say that Catholics are going to hell. Like,
right. Yeah. I guess that would be the most extreme version of it.
Where there's not a belief that Catholics were all kind of under the same umbrella of Christianity. Which, I mean, Catholics believe that Protestants, unless there's some kind of like, those is kind of the core beliefs, like kind of believe in that umbrella too. So, yeah, that was more what I was there are organizations that we're going to tell, or you know. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Okay. Those are
An
my
explicit saying Catholicism is wrong. There has to be something explicit anti-Catholic.
right. And I guess yeah, I want to follow up again on the core doctrine versus or I guess maybe I should be more specific and say core salvific doctrine,
Yeah.
as opposed to various other things that Protestants and Catholics may disagree on that is fair game to disagree on. I think that's the, if you've reached the point where you're disagreeing on core salvific doctrine, then you probably are in an environment where there's going to be things said such as Catholics are going to hell, or they believe in a kind of salvation that isn't biblical, or whatever they might say. Okay. So Everett, I'll stop and let you ask any questions that you had before I say my piece, because I had some other thoughts in addition to what Katherine said that I wanted to share too, but you can go ahead first.
Okay. Jeremy, just to clarify before I go on, when you say salvific doctrine, is that the same as what I call the criteria for salvation?
Probably.
Okay.
I don't. I'm not. It's referred to with different names, so I don't know that it sounds like it's the same thing. It's the things that you must believe in to be saved from a Christian point of view. And if you
because I would say PBCC was actually relatively agnostic then about salvific doctrine. I'm not sure it had a salvific doctrine, but anyway, that's somewhat aside.
Well, and I think that's where, I mean, isn't the creed there? Isn't there non-denominational? I mean, yeah, their faith statement is pretty simple, I think.
PBCC, the doctrinal statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's very light on salvific. There's maybe one sentence in there that is possibly what Jeremy's calling salvific doctrine, although even there, that's kind of iffy to me.
Okay.
But,
it's not the creed.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So okay, so Katherine, let me. So my questions for you are, so I think that the issue that I have with some of your characterization, and I also I greatly appreciate your taking of responsibility, which you have done, and I think you've always done. And one of the I think ironies of this for me over the years is I think I've said this before, is you and Emily. I mean, it's not, we haven't talked much about Emily, but this does sort of apply to you. You and Emily have not given yourself a free pass here at all. But although I think Steve has gotten one, which is the irony for me. But I appreciate you again taking responsibility, and that is not a new thing, and I think you have the character to do that. And so I appreciate you reiterating that today. My questions are, so when we talk about, or when you specifically just now have talked about the what you call steering away from Roman Catholic doctrine, or as opposed to explicitly criticizing Roman Catholic doctrine. The part that's missing is, don't we have to factor in what that doctrine actually is? Meaning that Roman Catholicism has a monopolistic aspect to its doctrine, which results in the significance of steering away versus explicit criticism different than something else.
When you say monopolistic, do you kind of Catholicism defines all of its doctrines, so it essentially it has an answer for everything in the sense of it's clear what Catholicism is.
No, I mean the Roman Catholicism stakes a claim of its own power and its own and the duties that others owe to it in such a way that changes the difference between steering away and explicit criticism.
Oh, like the Catholic Church teaches that they are the church holds the truth and they are the church.
Right. Well, Chris. Well,
versus the Protestant. Jeremy's Protestant church probably doesn't teach that it's not okay to go to the other non-denominational church down the street. It's probably fine.
Well, right, yeah. So yeah. That if you were, I mean, what you're saying, if you had said what you just said, but in reference to the Southern Baptist Convention, you'd be saying something different than if you were talking about Roman Catholicism.
But doesn't that only work in one direction? Meaning, if you're not a Catholic, what you're saying, Everett, isn't going to have as much weight as someone that is Catholic.
But no, because this is from the vantage point of knowing what Roman Catholicism is. There could be, I suppose, a theoretical scenario where there's an island of Protestants somewhere who have forgotten what Roman Catholicism is. But Katherine, you knew when you were doing all of those things, you knew what Roman Catholicism is and what it was teaching and the monopolistic aspect of its theology.
To be honest, a lot of Protestants don't understand Catholicism very well.
I essentially did not know what Roman Catholicism was until the very end of my undergrad experience when I started self-educating myself. Redundancy, I know.
So okay,
no, I think no.
Okay, let's back up. So in our earlier sessions, right, we talked quite a bit about these influences on us as kids.
Sure.
The more literary and artistic influences.
Sure.
But right, some of that was like we read about John Calvin.
Sure.
We read a biography of John Calvin. We watched a film about Martin Luther.
Oh, I read a ton of stuff about the Protestant Reformation. Oh yeah, okay. That doesn't mean I remembered it. Here, be clear. Let's be clear.
So you're saying, okay, but so Kevin, you're saying that was just water off a duck's back?
No.
Okay, well, what was that? What was that for you?
All the stuff I learned about the Protestant Reformation.
No, but what how did that impact you? How did that become a part of you?
What I learned about the Protestant Reformation in school?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure I came away from that thinking the Protestant Reformation was a good thing, right? Because that's what you learn. That is correct. You do learn that the Protestant Reformation is a good thing. Now, things like, we did not celebrate, what is it, Reformation Day, which is apparently a thing that people do and dress their kids up, like Halloween.
I didn't know.
I don't take offense. Well, I try not to take offense when I see things like that.
It's Reformation Day. By the way, I
don't even know what Reformation Day is, but I don't know, but it's a thing.
Isn't the bottom line of this that as kids you absorb this information kind of by osmosis, and you believe that it's more probably true than not, just by nature of the fact that you're being taught it?
Wait. It is correct that I read those things and thought, oh, the Catholic Church was doing bad things. The Protestant Reformation was good. We needed that. The Protestants are right. Not arguing with that. Yeah, I'm not arguing with that. But as to what the church actually is and teaches, and even kind of an understanding of, no, they really think they're the church. I mean, I probably knew that on some level, but like actually understanding that theology, no, because I was being taught Protestant theology, not Catholic theology. I was taught, no. I wasn't even taught Protestant theology growing up. Let's be clear. I think I was taught very core salvific things. PVCC was not. I don't think I understood a whole lot of Protestant theology either. Not really. I know I read books about John Calvin and the other things, but I think, actually really understanding the different Protestant thoughts and theories at the time, that did not stick in my brain.
Okay, let's go back to, so we've now had this phrase salvific theology again, which it's surprising me that that's coming up here. But so let me ask you, when you say core salvific theology that you were taught, what are we talking about there?
I mean, I just think that I feel like the way a correct portrayal of how I was raised was kind of the essential. Jesus died on the cross, you believe in that has salvific value. And then in terms of more theologies that people disagree on, whether that be predestination or, do you need to be baptized? Do you need to be dunked or sprinkled? Or I don't know what the other Protestant.
I'm trying to think of other infant baptism is a major issue.
Baptism. Okay, sure. Those things. Well, I mean, PVC didn't have infant baptism, so I guess that was a stand. But those other things, I just didn't. That was not. Which that's what you're going to get from non-denominational church generally, is you're not going to get we are Presbyterian, we are Lutheran, we are, I didn't know what consubstantiation was until college. I didn't,
I thought we spent an entire discussion on how that's not correct. The non-denominational church has a powerful doctrine.
Well, I feel like the loop that we keep going around on this is there's the fact that non-denominational churches make up their own doctrinal statement. And that's what a lot of people that attend those churches like the most about it. And that's a lot of times why they're founded, is so that they can create their own doctrinal statement and their own mission statement. But what we then keep going back to is how that connects back to Catholicism, and the fact that by creating your own independent body with independent authority and independent, an independent doctrinal statement, that you are thereby rejecting the authority of the Roman Catholic Church and also the authority of any other official Protestant denomination. Right, and I think we all agree that that's true. But that by doing that, you are saying we are not under the banner of any authority from any other denomination, Catholic and Protestant included.
Okay.
We're
Right?
also talking
But,
about my you asked about my experience. You're asking
right,
about my
and this is where I don't get what is that not factoring in what Jeremy just said. Is that not formative for you?
what specific like what specifically?
The autonomy of PBCC. That didn't. You're just saying that was water off a duck's back for you.
No, I was aware of the fact that it thought it was autonomous, and that's how a lot of Protestant churches were. And I also knew that there were different ones, like, oh, the Presbyterians are not like that, and Lutherans are not like that. And obviously the Catholics are not like that. No, I knew that. But I don't think I guess what I'm trying to say is my spiritual theological growth. I would say that I grew spiritually, like relationally with Jesus. I'm not talking about that really, but in high school and in the times that I was at PDC. But in terms of actual like theological understanding, that happened later when I was becoming Catholic. And I learned more about Protestant theology when I was becoming Catholic than I ever really understood at PDC. I'm not saying that's anyone's, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm just saying that was my experience, probably partially because that's what I was interested in or not interested in, or was sticking, what was not sticking, whatever. And I'm not saying I wasn't surrounded by things about the Protestant Reformation growing up. I'm not saying I wasn't taught things that I then forgot. That was just what was sticking. That's the point that I'm trying to make, is because you're asking about my experience.
So, could you give an example of something about Protestant theology that you learned in college that you hadn't known before?
Like, I guess it would be called sanctification, like the fact that Catholics actually think that we actually grow holier until we reach heaven, and that purgatory plays a big role in that. I don't think I fully understood that, like, oh, wait a minute, Protestants don't think that. I never thought about the jump from like how I am when I die to heaven, and how abrupt that is, and how to me that theologically doesn't make sense. I never even thought about that as a Protestant. I never even thought about that as a theology. It was just, when you believe in Jesus, you die, you go to heaven. Cool. But then actually thinking through what that means theologically, then it's, yeah. And I just remember like reading about it, and sometimes there would be things that would then explain, like, here's like Protestant thought on this, and actually like laying it out for me. I'm not saying there are Protestants that don't lay it out. I just wasn't reading those things. Most of my study as a Protestant would have been biblical study. So, there's theology in that, but there was also a lot of kind of like putting things into action, less than kind of an academic study of things. Which more of an academic understanding of theology was, later. Not that I've had an academic study of theology, but you know what I'm saying.
So and sorry, I know my questions are kind of all over the place here, and maybe that's not being super helpful, but I also know we need to end soon. So maybe I should just stop and let Jeremy, whatever you need to do, Jeremy, and then we can.
Well,
I can
wait, but
maybe
Everett,
ask more questions another time.
I feel like you were trying to lead up to something.
Yeah, let's keep going with that, because I think it was productive, and I can extend this discussion a few minutes to get my own piece in. It's not going to take very long, and it's mostly an extension of what Katherine was talking about. So I'd rather, Everett, you continue with your train of thought.
Okay. So, all right, Jeremy. Yeah, just tell me when I need to stop, I guess. So, okay. So, So because of the monopolistic aspect of Roman Catholic theology,
Yeah.
to steer away from it and to criticize it explicitly, to me those two things are the same thing. One is either steering away outside of the monopoly, or one saying I'm not in the monopoly. To me those amount to the same thing.
Yes, I see. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but I think
I
it only
think,
works one way,
but
though.
yeah,
Now, on a practical level, I think it only works one way.
But yeah, but again, I'm assuming that that I, in this scenario, or anyone that knows what Roman Catholicism is and what Roman Catholicism's orientation is toward me.
but I don't think that's fair for how I saw things, and I don't think that's fair for someone who I what Jeremy's saying about being one way, I think that's accurate. If I right now was to do any of the things I did 10 years ago or whatever, that would be correct. Anything from me pointing away from the Catholic Church, whether or not I said it explicitly, that's all lumped into of turning people away from the Catholic Church. That's correct. Me saying like, sure, like go explore some like Protestant churches versus don't ever go to Catholic church again. Those are the exact same. I mean,
so you're saying in your state of mind today, if you were to say those two things, they would functionally be the same thing for you today.
in a little bit of an extreme example. Yes, in terms of my knowledge of what I am, in terms of my knowledge of what the Catholic Church teaches. Well, because it also depends on the context. Where if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm exploring religions," I might say, "Well, maybe you should go check out some Protestant churches and some other churches, and like you need to explore truth because you're on your own."
Right. Well, yeah, I get that. I get that. That's a rather different statement than the other things you were saying. I get that.
Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, for me to tell someone, "Oh, it's fine, you go to Protestant church and don't go to mass," I am telling them to do something. If they're Catholic, I'm telling them to do something that goes against what the church teaches. And there obviously would be a difference whether or not they are Catholic or not Catholic.
Right, but if I was having a conversation with a Protestant friend of mine and said, "Hey, there's this really great book on the existence of purgatory. You should go read it because it has some compelling arguments," that's fine.
Well,
that would be pushing toward.
Right, but that's not. But it would work either way, I think, for me, because it's not. That doesn't violate anything for me to do that.
Well, Jeremy, that I don't view purgatory as as a monopolistic piece of theology.
But it's a piece of theology that Catholics hold that Protestants don't, except maybe on the fringes. There may be some fringe Protestant groups that do, but I'm not aware of any. The mainline Protestantism rejects purgatory.
Okay, I sort of guessed that, but I didn't know that exactly.
But Everett, but for me as a Protestant, if I had, there would have been a difference not really knowing as much about and not believing in Catholicism, even if I had understood it, not believing in it. It wouldn't have, it doesn't carry the same weight for me to say to someone like, go around to all the Protestant churches in the area and explore. Like, I do think there's a difference because you have to believe that Catholicism is all true to have that, or like for me to have that responsibility, I have to believe all of it. I think I don't think I have to be Catholic, but I have to believe all of it.
Okay, so um I'm so one thing I've been learning, and it's a disquieting thing for me to be learning, and I'm been increasingly struggling with how to deal with it. Both you and Jeremy, well, it sounds like Catherine, you somewhat less so than Jeremy, maybe, but this idea that things didn't stick with you, and that you're looking back at it from adulthood, and that's not, and I think as I've talked about a lot in the earliest sessions, that has no resonance in my life really at all. And
And
so I
sorry,
don't,
keep going.
so I'm struggling with figuring out how to, how my concerns translate into the life that you're describing for yourself, if it really was that different from mine. And also, I don't understand why my life was as different from yours as it was. And maybe you guys can try to explain that, because I don't I don't get that at this point.
Yeah. So
I think that's a very productive statement that
yeah,
was
I
just.
agree with
I
that. I
think
agree
that
with
I
that.
think as a group we just took a step forward in trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
And can I say something really quick,
and
Jeremy?
let me just say, I'm not like signing up here on like all the implications of it. I'm just saying that this is coming up, and I'm worried about it.
Okay. Uh, things. Okay. What did stick though is that was this the more spiritual side of things though, because what did stick is the Bible being, and like I distinctly remember getting my first Bible, and I distinctly remember like talking to Dad about different translations, or and like why that was important, or learning the importance of things like praying and the relational side of a religion, and making that a priority in my life and being involved in a church, because then I did go on to be extremely involved. So all those the thing that stayed consistent from being Protestant to Catholic was the relational piece. I didn't switch. I consider I had a conversion. I use that word, but I don't consider that I changed religion. So all of that stuck, and that's a lot of the influences you talk about, like Salty. There are some of those songs that stuck with me for like years that I really liked because they were about how much God loved me, and that stuck with me. So those things did stick.
Yeah. I think I'm going to expand on that a little bit. We do need to wrap up relatively soon, but we're at a pivotal moment here, so I want to keep going a little bit. The question of what stuck and what didn't is, I think it's actually a really interesting and important question. And the things that did stick, I think, are most of the things that we just haven't talked about, right? Like the importance of prayer, and like Catherine said, the Bible being significant and authoritative. The importance of relating to and having other Christian friends. To some extent, being aware of the fruit of the Spirit and what the significance of things like mercy and grace and love are. those are all things that I would say are things that stuck with me from growing up that I was exposed to in the home, and I guess to some extent was exposed at PBC, but I would say we're definitely way more formative at home. There were very
There were
few.
too many cute girls at PBC.
Well, there were very few things that I would say were formative at a theological level at PBC. I think it's more of the underlying spiritual and relational things that were formative at home that have carried with me to this day. Things like listening to Michael Card. I still listen to Michael Card all the time. I love his music, and it always speaks very powerfully to me. I would not have had that had I not grown up in that home. So things like that might sound like one-off things, but they have immense spiritual value. But then on the flip side, the theology, similar to Katherine, the formative theological period in my life was college and beyond. And I would actually say like later in college and beyond. So in one sense, I think it is very much the case that all three of us, to somewhat varying degrees, but all three of us have pretty different theological views now than we did growing up. On the spectrum, I'm probably changed the least, but I've still changed a lot. There are many things that I'm aware of now that I wasn't even aware of then, things that I've changed my mind on. And so that's where I think we've spent a lot of time talking about doctrine and theology, and that's really important. But for Katherine and myself, and I'll just stay speaking about myself, that's just not something that was, it was all just kind of a liquid goo until later in college. So looking back, my perspective of dad and my perspective of mom and our home and PBC and its leadership had way less to do with what they were teaching me that was factually correct, as opposed to what I was experiencing relationally and the types of habits I was forming in my life. And so maybe that's partly why we're having a little bit of a, or maybe why you mentioned a minute ago, Everett, that you feel like there's a divergence between your experience and our experience and how we can relate, if the chasm is too large or if there's ways for us to make bridges there. I think it's important that we acknowledge the difference between the spiritual, lifestyle type developments and the more intellectual theological developments, as just being connected but on different planes.
Okay, and we can pick that up, later. I don't. Whatever the categories of difference are, there's this. This is your account of how you experience formative experience is really different from mine.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that that's okay. And I want to, I'm glad we've all acknowledged that. And I want us to work to understanding how it was different for each of us. Because I think that's productive.
I'm not saying it was different. I'm saying our accounts of it right now are different. I'm not yet prepared to say that there's actually a difference. But I'm saying that the three of us are certainly describing it in really mutually incompatible ways.
Sure, that's fine. That's
And
fine.
as I said, as I said, I am worried about that.
Why are you why? What do you mean? Like in the
Because
sense that you think we're not
well, so one, it could be that some of us are wrong in our own understanding of ourselves. That worries me. Another possibility is that I was banking on us having a common, because look, there are only there's only 5 other human beings on this planet who have had the same life experiences that I had during that period of time, and you guys are 2 of them. And so I was banking on there being a sharedness to that experience that may not exist. So that's worrying. And um and then I think that then this gets into who's who what happened to Steve and why he did what he did. And I'm gonna still stick with I think that his experience is a lot more similar to mine and a lot less similar to both of yours. But I'll stand by that for the time being. But I think it does complicate how to deal with him going forward. So I'm worried about all of those.
It sounds like, and I'll let this be the last thing that we do, and then we'll close up shop. But it sounds like, Everett, you said that you were banking on the 3 of us to agree on our lived experience growing up.
Yes.
So, and I guess I would say that I think we have to break that into there's 2 important categories. There's the history, the facts of what happened, what each of us went through, and the second category is, or I should say, the first category is the history, what happened, and then the second category is how it affected us.
Yeah, but it appears that the different that again your account of the second one is so severely at variance from mine that it's actually affecting first because we're not because we can't get some basic facts straight.
Well, but I guess that's what I disagree about, because I feel like the one thing that we have had success in doing is agreeing on the facts of history.
Like ever, yeah.
Right? What historical facts do we disagree about?
So like the pathway readers. Right, and I told the story of the Christian that gets off the pirate ship and the other Christians arrest the pirates and right, that story. Everybody?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay, so that's a problem. Okay, that right there is a problem because I read the pathway reader that had that story. I thought you guys, well, I wasn't sure. Maybe you guys didn't go quite to that book or whatever, but so maybe you read it at the time, maybe you didn't. Then I spend a whole chunk of time here sharing that whole story. You guys did not remember it. and now I'm bringing it back up, and you're now not remembering your own refreshing of your memory of it.
Ever you shared that story during one
that,
of our recordings?
Absolutely, I did.
So Eric, so it's my bad for not remembering that, but the thing is, I still don't understand the deeper connection to how that is supposed to somehow make my experience of how that affected me more like yours.
That's not what I'm saying at all. What the question you asked and what I'm responding to is, you're saying, how aren't we agreeing on the facts? And obviously we're not, because the impact of all of this is so extremely different that we're not agreeing on, that we can't even agree on facts.
But I don't think that's a correct. I don't think that's an accurate representation or a description of what's going on, because we may forget things, but that doesn't mean that we don't agree on the facts. If you came to me right now and said, when in 1999 we went to Safeway on a Thursday afternoon, and then the next week I forgot that, and then maybe you made me recall that we both got cookies at the bakery that day, and I said, oh yeah, there were special orange ones. And then a week later, you say, hey, remember that story I told you about Safeway? And I say, no, I forgot. That doesn't mean that I disagree with you about it. In fact, I do agree with you about the facts. I think we have to be able to say that we all have good faith agreement and recollection about the things that we do remember. None of us are trying to deceive anybody else. If you told me that something happened and I say, oh yeah, I remember that, and then a week later forget, it just means I forgot. But it doesn't mean that I disagree, and it also doesn't mean that that thing didn't affect who I was at the time, right? I don't think it's fair to say we disagree on the facts. It's just that there's a lot that Katherine and I don't remember. And yeah, it's my bad that we had a recording 6 months ago and you said something that I don't remember. I apologize for that. I do that with my own wife, so obviously it's bad. But but that doesn't mean I disagree with you.
But in effect, it amounts to disagreement, because we are not sharing a common point of understanding here.
Well, but Everett, that has always been the case, because you have always remembered things with an uncanny ability. For someone who I believe doesn't actually have a photographic memory, you have the best memory of anyone I've ever met in my entire life. And you have always been able to remember things to an exponential degree that I never have been able to. So it doesn't surprise me that everything through the years made an extreme impact on you that would just not have been the same thing as Jeremy or I. I'm assuming that you read things at the age of 5 that you still remember. And a lot of 5-year-olds forget it within an hour. And Jeremy and I would fall into that second category. So, are you a dictionary of all the different influences that mom and dad let into our house? Probably that's an accurate way of saying it. And that would be a very different experience than most children, who it's more of it is osmosis, but it's not going to be a clear. This is not surprising to me in what I know about you and how you take in information versus how I think a lot of people do. Your ability to remember, your ability to remember is like crazy more than the average person, right?
No, I wouldn't necessarily say that.
Okay, well,
I think we all remember things in different ways and have strengths and weaknesses of our memory. And I mean, I'm some of my memory is quite bad. I'm not good at remembering names, for instance. If I meet somebody, the odds are way too high that I'll just forget their name.
Okay, well then maybe this is just a category of things that you have a particular ability to remember a lot better. Because I agree with Catherine that I think this has always been sort of a point of almost tension at times, where you'll remember things that I don't remember, and that's why the best thing that we can do, maybe the only thing that we can do, is in good faith to say we trust that what you're saying actually happened. Right? Because we could be sitting here saying we don't trust you, that we don't believe that what you're saying is right, and then we'd get absolutely nowhere. So that's not what's happening. I think Catherine and I have shown from the beginning that we are willing to accept your memory as what happened for historical things.
And I also think that I know we need to wrap up, but I also think that the lived experience is going to be very different, because there is going to be a level at which things that may doctrinal or certain things that were part of specifically more childhood material that Jeremy and I would not retain. If you're retaining all of that, and that would have been very explicitly Protestant, that is going to change things. Having that in your brain and remembering that is going to lead to a very experience.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We could easily go on for another half hour and then still not be done. So I'm just going to cut us off here. We obviously are going to need to keep talking about this, and we're all happy to do that. So let's convene offline, and we'll figure out the next time for us to continue talking.
Yeah.
Okay.